Hey everyone, I wanted to go over the new and exciting news that we got for Monster Hunter Rise on both the Nintendo Switch and on PC. And that's the fact that we finally got our hands on the brand new patch notes that are going to be coming available for version 3.9.0 that is set to drop on February 24th, so you know ahead of time before you download the patch what you will be expecting. Remember that PC players are finally going to be lining up patch-wise with the Nintendo Switch version. They're all going to be playing on version 3.9.0, and PC players are also going to have the option to purchase all the downloadable DLC, purchasable DLC that the Nintendo Switch fans already have, including the ones that are going to be included in version 3.9. However, PC players are still going to be missing a couple of weeks worth of event quests that the Nintendo Switch has ahead of them. That is going to be presumably be dropping within the next couple of weeks on Steam. So that's about the only real difference that we have now between the two versions of the game. So starting out in typical fashion, they mentioned that in order to be able to play online, you're going to need to update your game. In order to do so, you're just going to be able to have access online. So make sure you do just that. You're going to need an internet connection and all of that typical stuff. Nothing out of the ordinary. Moving over to the main additions and changes, they always mention that there's going to be new quests available every single week. That has not necessarily changed. They always mention this for whatever reason. And there's going to be new DLC for purchase on the Nintendo Switch eShop. But like I mentioned before, the same DLC is going to be available on Steam, on PC via Steam. So you're not going to be missing out if you're on PC for 3.9.0. Moving over to bug fixes and miscellaneous changes and the base facility changes, they mentioned that when changing the direction of the Toadversary and the training area, this would be the mechanized Tetranodon, that usually text turns yellow. But if the player changes another option after that, the direction text will sometimes turn back to white. This has now been fixed. This is a really interesting one, I guess, just because they're just changing the color of texting because there was just some weird bug in that regard. But, other than that, nothing necessarily major. Moving over to the player and buddy changes, they mentioned that they fixed a bug preventing the Utsushi cut hairstyle from being displayed properly when combined with certain heads and armor. They have talked about this Utsushi cut armor before. I believe there were some clipping issues with when the hair was originally revealed. The same thing happened with the Minoto and Hinoa hairstyles as well. But because this is paid DLC, it only affects a certain amount of people who decided to purchase it. So I guess they give it more attention or credence than any other type of hairstyle, which is interesting for sure. They also mentioned fixing a bug that prevents forelocks from being displayed properly when equipping the head armor in the Orion Layered Armor series. So another one of those paid DLC haircuts that gets attention only because people who paid certainly wanted to look right. They also mentioned fixing a bug with the display of the Azure Age sleeve on the body type 2. Usually these type of bug fixes when it comes to clothing and stuff, and is usually related to brand new DLC being added in, and the Azure set was just recently released on the PC as well, so presumably they picked up on that and now they're fixing it. They're also fixing a bug that causes the Rampage Twin Blades eye, or number 1, to be displayed in the opposite direction if the player uses a whetstone after equipping them. I'm not necessarily sure which one is the Rampage Twin Blades, but there you go. They're fixing. I guess they were gonna be looking backwards, and now they're just gonna be looking straight normally, as they should have been all along. And lastly, they mentioned fixing a bug very briefly causing the player's upper body to turn in an unnatural direction when another player uses Wyvern's Fire during multiplayer. Now this one is interesting only because usually they've dealt with a lot of lances and stuff, and heavy bowgun and stuff like that, weapons that kind of have some sort of distance to them depending on the attacks. They've already dealt with a lot of glitches in that regard and bug fixes, so it's interesting that they're now getting to this one, but other than that, it's always good. And in the last section, in the miscellaneous section, they talk about fixing a bug preventing other players from accessing certain facilities if the host is disconnected because no controller inputs were made for a certain amount of time. So usually when someone disconnects, you will be automatically kicked off to a solo battle, a solo mission, a solo quest, a event quest, or whatever it might be. So usually the game does a pretty good job in that regard, but it seems like there were still some issues where people were disconnecting, or you just and eventually end up getting booted and it would automatically just, give you some sort of issue. So they're addressing that. And of course, they always mention fixing various texts and bugs. That's typical. And other miscellaneous bug fixes have been made, but that usually is just like a blanket statement. It doesn't necessarily mean much. The overall picture of this patch is pretty minimal, to be quite honest. Version 3.9.0, I thought it was going to be a little bit more meaningful, only because it was syncing up the PC and the Nintendo Switch version. Finally, in that regard, they were going to be lined up all together. But as you can see, the patch notes are pretty slim. Nothing necessarily unexpected, just really minor stuff. And I guess it's a little bit of a bummer for those who were hoping for something more major, but ultimately I guess it does speak to the fact that they had been working, dropping patches month after month after month since the game dropped almost a year ago now. We're almost getting to that point where like the game came out almost a year ago, and they've done a pretty good job of like fixing whatever was wrong with it. I think the game is extremely stable now. I've not had any sort of weird glitchiness or anything along those lines. PC did have some issues with the save files that had been addressed most recently via a hotfix, and then an actual official patch was dropped for PC players, so they fixed that. The Nintendo Switch hasn't necessarily had any major issues for a while. I don't think there's been a lot of reports for anything along those lines. The only real thing that I do want to talk about when it comes to the PC right now, it is a issue with the frame rates probably having an issue with the way monster movement and monster frame attacks are being handled. I have a separate video on that I'm working on, that I want to put it out hopefully before the end of the week, that I'm going to be addressing some of that. I've also seen other people addressing that as well. This is going to be an ongoing issue, because this, I think, is going to be a major talking point if Capcom is not able to address it. But I'm going to give it its proper due in a separate video and go into it fully, because I think it is certainly worth discussing for sure. Do remember that on version 3.9.0, we're also expecting, like I mentioned just yesterday, a couple of voice DLC characters being added in. So, we're going to have that in, paid DLC coming in. Presumably, we're also going to get some sort of Kahoot or, some sort of stickers and stuff like that. That's also being added in as well. We're probably going to be going over that in a couple of days whenever we get that officially revealed. And maybe, any music or anything like that. I know people are always asking for more music. Maybe we'll get that as well. And whatever brand new event quests are dropped in as well. But other than that, we're just expecting to see what else they're going to provide us with, because we haven't even gotten a collaboration since the, USJ one. That would be last month. So we're just waiting for more of that going forward. If you're brand new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up. And as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.